right, let's go to line number 3, and joining us is the one and only, the mad scientist, as Mike Miller called him, and that would be Mr. Frank Foti. We used to call him Foti, Mr. Foti. Frank, good morning to you, brother.
Flash, this morning, Frank, I'll get Frank on the line in a moment. This is your godfather of technology speaking to you. This Barzini business, we're going to talk about surround sound. Hang on, here's Frank. Hey, Flash, how you doing?
I'm doing fine.
You guys called me a mad scientist, a Goomba, and all that other kind of stuff. I figured I probably needed to lead off and fulfill all the comments that were made. So, first of all, happy to be here. Thank you for the opportunity. And, listening to you and Mike talk about the stuff at the Music Box, I'm excited to hear it.
Yeah, there you go. Hey, that's so cool, though. I mean, they're gonna lay down maybe a bat out of hell that night on February 4th. And I was just thinking,
hearing you guys talk about it, we can easily make that happen. And I will tell you that I have listened long before the unfortunate event of losing Meatloaf yesterday, which is very sad. I have listened to that album in immersive tech that we want to talk about here. Listening to it in surround sound is literally amazing. So adding that to the February 4th event, I think, is really cool and a great idea by Mike.
Oh, Frank, let's get into some of the technology here, if you don't mind. And obviously you have this patented and all that, but as far as what you did and how you did it, I mean, you and Steve Church did the Telos system, which was revolutionary in its day, and it's used around the entire world today by broadcast stations. And in fact, I'm on a Telos right now. I'm using your system right now. I have to ask you, I mean, what was this one night you're saying, well, wait a minute, this can be redone. I mean, all this great music, this can be redone. Is that what happened?
There's a short story that precedes it, Flash. Back about 20 years ago, when the technology that's called HD radio was coming online, both Steve and I, for the FM version of the HD radio, felt that the HD needed to have some added pizzazz, something that would grab you, And we had been doing some work with surround sound, discrete surround sound. And at that time, the music industry was reissuing classic albums in like rock and roll, classical. They were reissuing them in 5.1 surround format. Well, unfortunately, two things happened. We knew that we would need to be able to offer everything in surround sound, and that wasn't available. Broadcast world chose not to try to, put a surround system over the air. But after having listened to certain records that were redone and fully remixed from the masters, like the multi-track masters in surround, I remember thinking there's got to be a way to take stereo, anything in stereo, and make it into surround sound. Now, it needs to be, in full disclosure, what I did is not the first one to do this. Other people have made attempts at it, and it just didn't sound right. It didn't sound natural. It was kind of like, the best way I could put it, it would be like a bad version of your dad's quad sound from the 1970s. It sounded, like echoey, phasey. It was, to keep it in simple terms, tricked up surround sound. Well, to answer your question, I had this idea that I kept saying to myself, there's got to be a way where I can break things down to develop the actual multiple channels. And then it occurred to me that when we listen to music in stereo, what the ear hears is the left channel in the left ear, the right channel in the right ear, and our ears perceive something in the center. Like when you're listening to a song and the singer's coming at us in the center. But in reality, there's no center speaker. I mean, it's something we call a phantom center. Yeah. So I said to myself, if there's a way I can actually create the center channel, then from that I can derive everything else and maintain the artistic integrity of, the original producer, the original engineer, and things of that nature. So it took a while for me to figure it out because, this 1956 brain, which only operates on vacuum tubes, it took a while to get the pieces operating as they did. But I will tell you, what you had mentioned, I'll never forget this. I got it running on like a Friday afternoon, and I'd been putting, in my office, there's a couch, and I was like working practically round the clock. I'd work, sleep on the couch, work, sleep on the couch. So I pulled an all-nighter, and one Friday afternoon, I'm like, I think I got it working. And my brain was kind of like, you need to go home and get some sleep. Well, I sat there, and I think the first song I used was Baba O'Reilly by The Who. And as you know from our time back at the Buzzard, yes, I lived and died, still do with The Who.
Oh, I know.
And it was doing what I wanted it to do. So at first I'm like, okay, go home and get some sleep and come back. Well, I couldn't. I sat there probably till 2, 3 o'clock the following morning going, what does this song sound like? What does that song sound like? And, everything I kept playing sounded fine. I mean, meaning it was doing what I wanted it to do. And it's something that I've been passionate about and excited about. And as a developer, it's easy to fool yourself because, on one hand, you want to say, hey, this is really cool. But at the same time, you're your own worst critic. I started asking colleagues, to take a listen to it. And all of them kept going, Frank, this is amazing. Frank, this is amazing. Well, now I'm starting to think that I'm getting this false sense of acceptance. And then I'm thinking, okay, if this really is something, I need to get connected with the people who would really give me stone cold, honest feedback, but from a very, very high level. I'm very fortunate that through people I work with, we happen to, have done some work and became associated with Gary Katz, the producer of Steely Dan. While we're based in Cleveland, we have offices in Pennsylvania, Minnesota, Europe, and other parts of the world. Gary happened to be at our office in Minneapolis, or Minnetonka, Minnesota, and I was there, and we were talking about it. And I said, Gary, if you don't mind, I'd like your opinion. And he said, sure. So at that time, I'll never forget this. He wanted to use the song Ruby Baby from Donald Fagen's album, The Nightfly, which was, an album he also produced. And he listened to it and he went, Frank, that's phenomenal. While I've done the production for Steely Dan, Roger Nichols was my technical guru. And unfortunately, Roger's passed on. And he said, Frank, I give you high marks on this, but if you're looking for technical, feedback, I can't give it to you, but I know those who can. I said, okay, great. He said, now to do this, if you don't mind, we might have to take a little airplane ride to London. I'm like, I'm game with that. So Gary and I got on an airplane and flew to London. We went to part of London known as St. John's Wood, where there's this little baby recording studio on a street by the name of Abbey Road. Oh, yeah, it happens to be known as Abbey Road. And we were there to meet with another record producer, engineer, gentleman by the name of Hugh Padgett. Hugh's, like Gary, very well known, having produced The Police, Phil Collins, Genesis, Peter Gabriel, XTC, and a host of others. The night before we were going to do this demo for Hugh at Abbey Road, Gary and I went out to dinner with Hugh, and we're over, a couple steaks and, a few adult beverages. Hugh politely tells me, he says, Frank, I'd explained it to him the way I just did for you. And he said, Frank, that sounds great. I think I'm excited to hear this, but I just have to tell you, I've heard a lot of other attempts at, he was rather derogatory about other attempts. And I said, Hugh, I agree with you. I said, and in full disclosure, if this stinks, it's okay. You can't hurt my feelings, because if it doesn't work to your acceptance, that just tells me I got more work to do. Fast forward to the next day, I said, no, by the way, give me a name of a song that we can use that would be your reference. He said, that's easy. Every Breath You Take by The Police. The next day, we're at Abbey Road. I mean, Flash, I got to tell you, you walk in that facility, it's surreal. I mean, if you're a Beatles fan or not, as well as everyone else who's recorded there, I mean, I still pinch myself over the fact that this goofy kid from Wickliffe, Ohio, who luckily got to work with you and the rest of the gang at WMMS, got to be at Abbey Road.
Yeah.
So we go up in this room. It's all set up. Hugh comes in. I mean, amazing sound. And Hugh comes in, and we play Every Breath You Take. And Hugh's walking around, and he's listening, and he's got, walking each speaker. He's got like a furrowed brow. And when the song ends, he comes up next to me and he takes his elbow and jabs it in my side. And he said, "Frank, what the fire truck did you do?" And I'm thinking I'm about to have my behind handed to me. And he said, "That's amazing." And he asked if we could play more stuff, which we did for 4 more hours. And then I'll finish the story by saying, these famous people, you know more of them than I do, but they speak of one another like, "Oh, there's Mike, there's Flash, there's Jeff."
Yeah.
And he says, he goes, "George and Phil and I used to, I knew what George was trying to do with the Boys." I'm thinking, the Boys. Oh my God, he's talking about the Beatles. He said, "We haven't listened to the Boys yet." So we played Golden Slumbers from the album Abbey Road at Abbey Road, and it was like one of those mind-altering experiences. So that may be more than what you wanted, Flash, but that's a lot of the background about what we've got going on that'll be happening down at the Music Box on February 4th.
And you're going to be there for that, right? You're going to be talking to the audience?
Oh, of course. You know what I mean? I think having the opportunity to do this and for Mike to be as ecstatic about it, and my friend, when Mike mentioned about Mark Tennant, and Mark had been on me for months going, "Frank, there's something here. We got to, I think in a live setting, this thing will be great. Come on. Just to be able to demo it down at the Music Box was an honor. And then the event, where we did the preview, a week and a half ago, was an honor. And the feedback there has been phenomenal. Even you, I know you had to leave early, but you're like, "Oh my God, I can't believe this." And,
I know.
And
it's just
your
amazing.
reaction has been the same as it's been for so many people. And by the way, it's not just a small, it's not like just Gary Katz and Hugh Padgham. Grammy Award winner Frank Filippetti has heard this and given me high marks. The French performer Jean-Michel Jarre has actually used the tech in remastering some of his music. And we had the opportunity to present this to Greg Hawkes of the Cars. And, we went to Boston and presented it to Greg, and he was blown away by it. And so, at this point, the little gizmo, which we call Déjà Vu, seems to have, won over a lot of people. And we're hoping, to have a lot of fun with this, to do the Steely Dan album, Asia. And if you've got the time, there's an interesting surround sound story about Asia as to why we picked Asia to do on February 4th.
Well, you know what? We have to save that because we're going to have to run along here. But I'll tell you, Frank,
I apologize if I overstayed. I apologize if I overstayed my welcome.
No, well, I kind of figured that anyway. I know you very, very well, and I know you're going to tell me more than the story. There's a lot.
Well,
there's a lot to what goes on. Hey, I want to tell you something, and this is what we're talking about right now, and I have the liberty because I purchased this hour from WERE, and I'm trying to bring back those days of good radio to talk about what's going on in Cleveland, and this is a Cleveland story. And Frank, you know this. You were there at that golden time in Cleveland radio. Jeff Kinsbach, myself, Matt the Cat, Kid Leo, Denny Sanders, John Gorman. Meatloaf just passed away. Meatloaf would not be Meatloaf today if it wasn't for what happened in Cleveland, Ohio.
I know that.
Yeah, you know that. You know that.
I know that.
Yeah, you know that. And it's cool that Mike said that he's going to play maybe Bat Out of Hell on that night on February 4th. But there's so many good things, and it was just it was like a laboratory back then of creativity, and you are a big part of that. You came out of that, and it's still happening. It's happening now at the Music Box. So.
Well, yes, it is, Flash. And if I may say so, it was always an honor and a pleasure to have been a part of WMMS in its heyday. And, again, how some little kid from Wycliffe High School ends up, working at WMMS with all of you guys. And, I was as much a fan of WMMS as I was, an employee. It's like every 2 weeks they'd give us an envelope with a check in it. And I remember thinking, they pay us to do this, and really, it was incredible.